What are the karmic lessons and delays that Saturn brings when it's in the third house? First of all, how do you find out if your Saturn is in your third house? Go to my website astrolada.com and you need to know your time of birth at least within 10, 15, 20 minutes in order to find the exact house position of a planet. Otherwise, this video will not be of help of you if you do not know your time of birth. But what happens if when you put your time of birth and place of birth correctly, then Saturn is indicated by the letters SC in my chart. And if Saturn is in the third square from the ascendant, this is where the ascendant, the first house is always here in this square. And the third sign is this square. So if Saturn is here, it already shows that Saturn is influencing your third house. But it's most important to see that Saturn is in the same square with the third Roman numerical, which means it's with the third house cast. It will still have the same effect, similar effect when Saturn is just in the third square from the ascendant, starting from here. But when it's with the third cusp, you really feel it, because the cusp is the punch of the house. And sometimes the third house cusp might be even here in that square. And if you have Saturn like that, you would again feel the influence of Saturn influencing the third house. Sometimes the third house cusp might be even here, and you would feel Saturn even there. And sometimes you can have just Saturn here without any house cusp with it. Then again it will feel like Saturn in the third house. And in a Western chart, circular chart, this is the ascendant. It starts from here. So this is the first, second, this is the third house, and Saturn will be here. So what are the karmic lessons? First of all, wherever Saturn is, this is where we have some difficulty in our life, especially in the first 30 years, 35 years in the first part of our life, because we've made some mistakes there in past lives, because in past lives we were given an opportunity, we abused it, or we didn't do it rightly. And when Saturn is the third house, it usually shows karma with siblings. So if you have a brother or a sister or cousins that you grew up with, maybe you might have some difficulties there, especially in the first part of your life, maybe some kind of a distance between the two. Maybe you even separated younger and you cut off connections with siblings faster. And sometimes there are just more difficulties in the life of the sibling when Saturn is there. And usually they reflect on your relationship with that sibling. Or even if you don't have siblings, you might have more difficult karma with relatives. Siblings, this can show more difficult karma, and having to solve out a difficult karma and overcome some problem with your relatives, because third house rules relatives, or with your teammates and co-workers, because the difficulties with siblings in early life usually reflect in our ability to cooperate with others and to do teamwork when we grow up in career. So often, even if you didn't have any siblings, later in life or in school with your schoolmates, teammates, playmates, maybe you felt like you were a bit more restricted in that area, that you were a little bit overlooked, or even in older age you might find yourself that you don't feel so comfortable when you're in teammate kind of situations where you feel like you're not noticed, or you're not understood well, or that the others are kind of not paying you enough attention, they're not hearing you enough, so this can create, especially in the first 30 to 35 years of life, one of the big kind of a sense of lack and inadequacy in life, because this is where we feel weakest usually. Saturn shows our vulnerabilities, and in this third house it can be this sense that we're not understood well, because usually third house is our communications, how we are heard, how we communicate with others, and usually either from past lives or from the early childhood, the child or the person was misheard. They were not paid attention. When you'd say someone, they would be looked over through or glazed over. Their siblings didn't regard what they said. They didn't regard the expression of their needs, their communications, or their parents, maybe they didn't do it. And later on, it's even harder in life. It becomes hard in life for the person to feel respected and to feel understood when they're trying to express their ideas. And the breakdown stage of such people, because Saturn can have this breakdown stage, is that they might just feel like, no one understands me, what's the point to even explain. They might feel like they sometimes try hard and hard to explain, but they feel like the others just don't hear them, they don't understand them, you know, and they even stop trying, making any effort to be in teamwork with others, so to express their thoughts, to communicate them clearly. You know, this can be hard in the first 30-35 years of age. But usually after that, you tend to sort out those issues. Wherever Saturn is, you work hard on those issues, you work hard on your ability to express yourself. Even as a child, maybe sometimes I've seen people who, they've moved to a different country and the child felt it speaks differently than other children at school. So it felt like, again, its communication and ability to express its thoughts was restricted in some way. Either it was the child was laughed at, or it felt unheard because of siblings or because of teammates and schoolmates. And even sometimes the early education of a child might have been more difficult, more burdensome, requiring a lot of more hard work than it requires other children. But wherever Saturn is, the good news is that we improve with age more and more. So with age, these people will tend to be better and better at dealing with others, at expressing with groups of people in particular. They might not love it. They might not love teamwork and anything, because there's always the sense of lack stays, but they will become better and better, especially if they're in the sense of a regulatory figure when it comes with teammates, or kind of a controlling figure, because Saturn has this ability to control later in life and to manage things. And also they can become very good at communications and media later on. They can actually take on careers in communications and media to work through the karma of Saturn this way. The best way to work through this karma of Saturn is to make it as your job, to make it something that you do daily, because you only learn the lessons of Saturn when you repeat something over and over and over again, you know. And such people can become very good in have some work in the media, with computers, with internet, which requires the mind, the structure, thought, but it's never overly creative. It's usually more like regulated. Say they can be programmers, writing programs, or bureaucrats, where they need like documentation of laws and putting order into thought. So they can be like editors in magazines, because they can take a text and restructure it, because Saturn is a planet of restructuring, and the third house rules the mind, so they can have a very structured thought, and which can help them later in life in their career. They can do very good presentations, they can do very detailed, strict, well ordered anything of the written word, and and technical writing as well. And they can be quite good at bureaucratic work as well, or some kind of mentalized, regulated, repetitive work of the mind that requires, you know. And also, third house is the house which can make, with Saturn, they can make good mathematicians. Not philosophical thought, but more of the skill thought, of the logical, rational thought. Because Saturn, the third house, deepens the thought, is the thinking, is the house of thinking. So these people can be quite deep thinkers, and quite good at practical mathematical things as well. But sometimes this deep thinking, because Saturn is a negative suppressing influence, can turn into negative thinking. So people can have rigid thought patterns or repetitive thoughts that, because Saturn is a planet of being stuck. And when you're stuck in your own thoughts, it can be like a repetitive. When you hear a thought, it can stay with you and play on a loop, and it might be so hard to get yourself out of a negative thinking mode. So such people have to learn not to allow negative, mentally depressive states. It's one of the combinations that can bring depressions or negative expectations and negative rigid thinking. And also such people, when they it's hard to change their mind on something, their opinions. And also they're very cautious mentally. Any new information, they judge it, they doubt it, they see it through, they don't take it at face value. You know, third house is the information that comes to you, the knowledge. Saturn is cautious. It's been burned before, maybe in past lives, maybe in early childhood, you've been told something, a lie, or you've made yourself a laughing stock because of some information you didn't check. So later on, you become very cautious when it comes to such new information presented to you. So also I've seen that a lot of people come to astrologers and psychics when they have Saturn in the third house, because it's hard for them to take decisions, because they doubt their own ability to rationalize their thinking patterns, to see because third house, as I said, is thinking, is analyzing, and Saturn is a doubtful influence, especially in the first 30-35 years of their life. You can see them asking advice, but then doubting it. And such people, I've seen them when they come to the website, they would call me, and then they'll call another psychic, and then they would probably call 10 astrologers to have a confirmation of what they're being heard. And of course, they hear different things. They get even more confused and more, so it's hard sometimes to move forward when Saturn is in the third house, because you get stuck in your thoughts and you doubt a lot of the information. And such people need to learn. One of the things is to learn to detach themselves so much of all this information. Sometimes they need, because the third house is all the information we have, and it's also the house of self-starting, of courage. But when you have so much information and you're self-doubting and thoughts which are like self-doubtful, and you're wondering which one is correct, it's very hard for a person to initiate new things. Self-initiation and courage is the third house, so Saturn can block it in the first 30 years of life. It can make it more difficult, 30-35 years, for the person to start new things, to take decisions about starting new things, because of this doubt they have, and they always want to have all the information, and they overload in information, and they still feel insecure in their decisions. So such people, they need to learn that, whatever information they have, it will be enough for them to take the next step. They have to learn to take the next step, not to wait for 100 expert opinions, for 100 confirmation of the information. They need to be able to just go for it, And this gets better and better after the age of 35. Actually, third house is the house which improves a lot after 30-35. But before that, you might find yourself quite doubtful and finding it difficult to take decisions and to make the first jump. As I said, Saturn is a bit of difficult karma that you have to work through with co-workers, teammates, siblings, neighbors as well. You might have pain in the ass neighbors sometimes, when Saturn is in the third house. But if Saturn is in great dignity, like being in Aquarius, Libra, or Capricorn, these siblings can be just a bit more your relation. They might be more serious people, more Saturnian people, more hardworking people, a bit more cool. It doesn't have to always necessarily have difficult relationship with those, but you might have a bit more distance with those siblings, or they might be a source of more worry for you sometimes, and let's see, the thought patterns, the communications, sometimes, as we said, person can feel limited, and like people misunderstand them. They always have this fear. But as I said, with age, especially after 35, they can become experts at communication, of expressing themselves. And the third house is the hands, your ability to manipulate with your hands. And Saturn often a person can feel lame wherever Saturn is, like inadequate. So the person can be a bit clumsy with their hands, but there is like a pull, like the person is pulled to work hard in that area. So for such people, learning handcraft and hand skills requires a lot more repetition than for other people, but it relieves them with a greater sense of satisfaction and achievement once they do that. So such people can really benefit from learning maybe some handcraft, painting, drawing, playing an instrument, and they need long practices for those. But wherever Saturn is, you gain mastery after a lot of hard work. Jupiter is the opposite. If Jupiter is in your third house, you pick up an instrument and you start playing, and it comes to you naturally. While with Saturn, you work hard, the hours, repetition. If you want to be painter with Saturn in the third house, you paint for hours, for days, for years before you perfect yourself, but you become masterful and you become master of detail and of perfection. You're very self-critical to yourself. Whatever Saturn is in third house is the ability of the hand, the skill of the hand, which is for musicians, for painters, for writers, the ability of the mind as well. Such people, they can become really good writers later in life, but always it takes them a lot of hard work initially. Let's see. I think we talked mostly about that. Yes. Another negative thing is that such people might worry a lot, because with those negative repetitive thoughts, it might be hard for them to let go of worries. But again, after 35, in your 40s, this position is one of the easiest to deal with, because a person just learns how to have a very highly structured thought, how to have a highly regulated thought, and a person needs to learn a lot of self-control in the house of Saturn, and it happens after 30, 35, and this is control of the thoughts. Otherwise, when you don't have it, they tend to go to the negative side, you know, and very controlled. And such people, they don't like sitting there and just gossiping for hours. When they want to talk important things. They want to talk deep things. You're not gonna see them hanging out in coffees, you know, chatting for hours like the European culture is here, you know, or just staying on the phone for hours, chatting with friends. Just if they do communicate, they want it to be meaningful, to be deep, to be something that contributes some knowledge to them in some way, you know. But wherever Saturn is, we tend to work very hard in that area and tend to become masters later on, even though we might be feeling quite lacking in the first part of life. Thank you.